Today we're looking at a magenta ink by Akkerman, their Dutch Masters number 6. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now there's timestamps down below so that if you are in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Nimicine Singularity with a fine nib to write for a day and to take my notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in order to have some kind of standardization to look at. There's additional writing samples later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to make sure I keep my writing sample consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading. You look at the bottom of the D and the M, you look at the right side of the 6, you see some shading that's occurred. Look at the word Akkerman. You see how it starts very dark and works its way much lighter. So there is very nice shading that's going on with this ink. Now the extra fine looks to be around the same tone as the 1.1 stub. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, plenty of very nice shading. Look at brown, very dark to much lighter. Look at lazy, very dark to much lighter. So it's got very nice shading and tone that's coming across with this ink. 7 seconds to dry. The medium is slightly lighter than the extra fine. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, plenty of very nice shading. Quick starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Brown starts dark and gets light. Fox starts light and gets dark. Nice. 11 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows not a ton of color variation, really none shows up there. It was harder to find up there. The medium shows a lot of color variation and it was easy to find there. Tomoe River. No bleeding. Little's coming through in the scrubby, but I'm putting it on stupid thick. Normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread. It has some halo in the darkest areas. So the K's have some nice haloing that's going on. The number sign, nice haloing that's going on. No sheen and decent shading. You see, as it gets darker, we get the halo, which is something we've seen before. So when it's much lighter, like at the man part, there's not so much halo. But the K's, darker and halo. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone than the stub with no feather spread. It does still offer some halo at the darker parts like the B in brown, the F and the X in fox. Great, it has some halo there. It has no sheen, but it does have good shading. Now the shading shows up where the halo is, so they are related to each other in their performance. The LA has a darker tone and a little bit of the halo where the Y is lighter and doesn't have it. 12 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine. No feather spread. The halo and the shade show up together just like on the extra fine and the stub, and it has no sheen. So brown starting darker getting lighter has more halo to none. 29 seconds to dry. Very worth it for how nice this is to look at. The scrubby of the extra fine shows almost no color variation, although we got some up there. The scrubby of the medium shows plenty, and we got plenty. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is slightly lighter in tone than the 1.1 with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does have shading. You just have to pay attention. It goes from a dark to a mid to a dark. From a dark to a mid. Dark, mid, dark. Excuse me. So it is all there. It's just that because it's going from a mid to a dark tone, it's not as obvious. 8 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and the shading is working in the same way.
Fox goes from dark to a mid-tone to a dark tone. Jumps goes from a mid-tone to a dark on the downstroke of the P back to a mid-tone in the P to the S. So it has nice shading. It's just much more subtle here because of the range that it's traveling is not as far. 14 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine and the medium, looking far left to far right, show that it does have color variation, and that is the kind of color variation we're getting here. It's not extreme, but it is there.
I agree with Vita that we learn a lot when we do multiple chromatographies.
The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this gray at the bottom that's pushing its way up. This, what looks like a brownish tone, but I don't think it actually is, but it looks like kind of a very light brownish tone. And then a very hot magenta at the top. I don't know if that's actually a phrase. I'm going to go ahead and start it. Hot magenta. That should be an ink name. Hot magenta. I'm going to write that one down. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the most noticeable or even only difference that we actually see between them is the line across the bottom of that grayish tone is very there and into the paper. With only 10 minutes, it's begun to bond with this filter paper.
Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it.
Looking at the highlighter, it's doing okay. The extra fine goes to about a medium. It gets kind of feathery, but it doesn't get blown out and unreadable. So you could use this in a note-taking situation if you really wanted to. Now, water is moving all of the magenta tones away, but really leaving behind that kind of gray that we saw in the chromatography. Pen flush is doing a bit more than what water did. Now you can see some areas where the white of the paper is just wanting to come through, but hasn't quite yet. So I believe that given a little bit more time and a little bit of elbow grease, that pen flush is all that you need to get this out of your pen. Now 1/3 bleach solution completely removes it from the paper, but there's no need to use that to get this out of your pen.
I test the viscosity or flow using a tilt test, which I'm going to link the video showing how I do that. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9.
Akkerman Dutch Masters number 6 has a viscosity of 2.59, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those. Now for the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Akkerman Dutch Masters number 6 has an average dry time of 14 seconds, again making it normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Akkerman Dutch Masters number 6, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And apparently I got in a black kick for a little bit. I went with Diamine Jet Black.
The second writing sample is done on TWSBI, Monokaki, and Leuchtturm 1917 journal.
Here we see it in TWSBI notebook paper. Now we get no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is slightly lighter a tone than the 1.1 stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and only 6 seconds to dry. The medium is noticeably lighter than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 11 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us no real color variation, and we didn't get any. Monokaki. Man, one day I'm going to learn how to say that and I'm going to be disappointed. No bleeding, minor ghosting. It would stop me, but it might not stop you. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 9 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, far left to far right, shows color variation, although we didn't get it. And the scrubby of the medium, far left to far right, does show a little bit here, but it's not up here in the writing samples. And Leuchtturm 1917 notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting, doing pretty good. The extra fine, the 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone than the stub, with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 6 seconds to dry. The medium is a much darker tone than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub. No feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it, we didn't get it, and that is all that I have for the writing sample.
So what do I think of Dutch Masters number 6? You know, through doing a bunch of reviews, I've really found a bunch of magenta inks that I like a lot, and this is one of them. Now, it's in my top 3 of magenta inks. The only problem for this ink is Robert Oster's Maroon 1789. That's just so fantastic, I would choose it over this. But this is definitely in my top 3. It is very nice, and always a good alternative to red for those of us that have to grade papers. So what nib and pen would give the best writing experience with this ink? I found that a dry fine pen really puts down a nice, not nowhere near red tone. It really makes the magenta that is this ink stand out in a truly spectacular way. I do new ink reviews every single day, so if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.